I haven't done any work on the whole microblog concept for some time, and I thought it was time that I actually stepped in again and tried to make particularly the client software a bit more useful, or certainly easier to use, I think is the main thing. Now, just a reminder, or for those who are not aware of the whole microblogging concept, what we have is a small server which has text files on it, and those text files contain very short pieces of information, which we'll see in a second when I show you the software working. And on the other end, we can either access this directly using JS8Call, or we can use JS8Call plus a microblog client. And there are some distinct advantages with using the client as well, which we'll see in a second. Okay, so that's the setup. Now, if we look at physically how this hangs together, we have the client software that doesn't actually look like this anymore. So this is the original slide. And it connects through JS8Call API into JS8Call, communicates using a remote radio across HF, or could be VHF actually, no reason why not, across to a receiving radio, and then into JS8Call this end, and then into the server software. And basically we send it requests for these small pieces of information, and the server responds with whatever we've requested. Digging in a bit deeper into the operation of the client, what we find is that information, post information, listings and post content flows from JS8Call into the client software, and then it's stored in a database in the client. And we can see that database if we have a look just here. For example, we can look at what's contained in there for all of the posts for a particular blog. So you can see here that for some we just have listing information, so the title of the post, and for others we have the title and the content. So that's the way that we maintain a cache of information. This is the new look for the client. This is a work in progress, so you'll have to excuse any little funnies with this, but I think it gives the idea of how this will work. So the first thing is, over on the left hand side, we now have a list of blogs that we have heard. Okay, so this doesn't necessarily mean that we've connected to them. This will list all the blogs that we've actually identified by listening for microblog announcements over whichever band you're listening on at that point in time. So the idea here is you could leave this running overnight, and you could come back to it and you would have a list of all the blogs that had been seen. The information in here is the same as it was before, which is this is the latest blog ID, and this is the latest blog date, and this was when we last saw that station. So you can see, or saw that blog, sorry. So you can see that we saw M0PXO blog on 2 different frequencies at different times. But what will happen is, as we collect the blog information, it will all be registered against one central blog in the database of the client. So here you can see that we've got a whole list of blog entries that are available. Unfortunately, they go back to being quite old, because this was stuff I did ages ago. So now you can see that although we've got a summary line for blog 47, we don't actually have the content. So the content of the blog is over here. And if we click on this entry just here, you'll see that down here you'll see a progress message, and it says it's now gone off to the server that's serving up M0PXO, and it's asked it for the blog entry number 47. So I'll let that return and then we'll pick up again. Okay, and now we can see the entry, the data. So if I go to another entry like this one here, and I come back to that entry 47, obviously it's now stored in the database. Now, that's, I hope this is easier to use, as you can just click through these and check what's actually what we have, what data we have. Now, the one thing about this version of the client is that it's what I would call fully promiscuous, which basically means that if your radio and JS8Call sees any other station asking for, say, the content of ID 64, and that blog content is transmitted, it will automatically be populated into your database. So that means that whoever requests data can effectively populate your database. Now, there are pros and cons of this, as I realise. On the plus side, it does mean that it cuts down the amount of traffic to the server and also cuts down the time needed to gather information, because obviously you could leave this running and let's say you were in an emergency situation and this laptop that I'm doing this on was running for the day. It would be picking up information continuously, and that would save you having to wait for the information to be retrieved from the server. The downside of it, and this is the downside of this whole solution, and in fact I guess it's a limitation of JS8Call, is there is no mechanism for what you would call non-repudiation. So there's no guarantee that what I'm receiving, whether it's when I send a GET to the server and get the information, or if I gather it in a promiscuous way, there's no guarantee that what I'm getting is the real deal. Somebody with malicious intent could actually intercept that and just transmit their own message, and you'd be gathering that. But I guess that's a problem with JS8Call and any form of unencrypted and anything where you don't have a security key. Running a security key in this mechanism would be pretty difficult, because the first thing is security keys tend to be binary. Well, they will be binary, which means you'd have to encode the binary with, one of these binary to ASCII type encoding mechanisms, the name of which escapes me, but it's the one you use with emails. And also the size, obviously the size of all messages would increase dramatically. Even just transmitting keys and things would be pretty challenging. Plus you'd have to have a certificate authority, and well, you get into a whole security key infrastructure issue. So that's something that probably needs discussing at some point. There are some basic things you could do that would stop your average Joe blogs just jumping in and intercepting messages. But if you wanted to make it very secure, that could be quite challenging. Okay, so the other thing I was going to show you was that you can see down here that we've got ID 45, and then we've seen ID 30 being transmitted to someone else and without the date information, so it's one of the short listing type listings, if you're familiar with that, with the server. So the question is, how do I get anything prior to 45? Well, what I can do is right click and do get more posts, and that will go off to the server and it will get 40 through 44. So it will get the summary lines for those blog entries 40 through 44. So let's let it do that, and then we'll come back and have a look. Okay, so you can see now that it auto-refreshed with the missing 40 through 44 entries. That took 3 minutes. I don't know if you noticed from the clock at the top, but that took 3 minutes to transmit. So, you know, this is not a speedy mechanism, which I'm sure you realise with JS8Call. It's, you know, it does have its speed limitations. Okay, only two other things to tell you. Sometimes you can get corrupt entries, like you could get a corrupt entry here, and you can just refresh the listing. So you can refresh just this entry. And you can also get corruption in the content. And as you can see, you can just click there and refresh the content. The progress thing probably needs some work, but it does show you that something's happening. So I guess that's good. Over here in the blog information, what I'm going to do is probably populate this with the information that you hold in JS8Call. Let me find that. This information here, station info. The only thing I did think was it would be useful if I noticed, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. He had an entry in his blog, a blog entry that described the hours he would be operating on different frequencies, which I thought was a really good idea. Now you could put that in the info field in here, but maybe we need something else. It would just be another text file somewhere on the server. That would be the best way to do it. Then you wouldn't have to mess around with the settings in here. But I'll have a think about that. It's not so important as just finishing off these last few bits. One of the things it doesn't do at the moment is if I scroll the mouse wheel, which I'm doing at the moment, it doesn't actually scroll up and down, but that's a relatively easy fix, and I'll put that in. But anyway, any feedback would be much appreciated. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you on the next one.